Level up your success with the ICABA World Network, where accomplished Black professionals and entrepreneurs have created a thriving global ecosystem built from valuable connections and impactful collaborations. Be a part of a trusted network that uplifts, inspires, and enhances your success. Join like-minded and leading Black professionals to foster meaningful relationships, unlock opportunities, and access the resources you need to thrive in your career, business, and life. Go to ICABAWorldNetwork.com and join today.
So I want to welcome everybody to the April 22nd version or the edition of ICABA Biz Connect. And so today we're going to talk about the value and the opportunity and how to make the most out of being involved in a peer advisory group. And one of the things that, the Founders Advisory Network, which presents the ICABA Biz Connect, our motto or our logo, tagline, whatever you want to call it there, is that together we go faster and further. And so that is more than, just a tagline, if you will. And it really does relate to the dynamic that happens. I mean, it's even spiritual. We know that in the Bible, it talks about where two or more are gathered in my name. A three strand cord is stronger. But even in Proverbs, God talks about that where uh, there are many advisors, plans succeed. So what we're doing is not something that is, if you will, only inspired by man, but it's been ordained, by God that we work together. Collaboration is the way that we were built. And so one of the things that ICABA is addressing with our ICABA Founders Circle is also the challenges that many, if not all, but many Black founders find themselves in, and that is that many of us do not have a abundant history or an abundant resource of individuals in our circles of influence, family, friends, associates, particularly our family and friends who are also a part of the culture, who have people who've already grown successful businesses. And as we're into the year 2026, there are, if you will, generational instances of people who've had what we generally refer to as mom and pop businesses. But now we're getting into businesses that require sometimes a different level of skill and resource, and what someone may have had prior experience in may not be quite as relevant. And so we can find ourselves, almost sometimes out there alone trying to figure it all out. And because we think that a lot of times when we're trying to figure something out and we're challenged with trying to get it done, where we're maybe again being somewhat isolated or just out there in an island by ourselves, we may not always be as aware that many other cultures and other individuals are finding success by coming together and collaborating and sharing with others their business knowledge and experience. And that has been a huge, if you will, advantage. And so we're trying to take advantage of that. And, one of the things I want to do as we get started today is introduce our panelists, and I also want to introduce and acknowledge my partner in this effort with the Founders Circle, Mr. Andrew Frazier, masterpreneur, the founder and CEO of the Small Business Pro University, who's here with us today. And it's through a collaborative partnership that we have launched the ICABA Founders Advisory Network's Founders Circle. So we have two panelists here with us today who are uniquely qualified and with their experience in this space of not only running successful businesses, but also being involved on a number of different levels with the collaborative peer advisory experience in being able to learn what they need and access the resources they need to successfully run their businesses. So the first person I want to introduce is the beautiful lady, Miss Yvette Wood with Ruach Curated Events. She is their founder and CEO. She is also as we call, serial entrepreneur, having successfully managed a number of different businesses from being in the healthcare space to being in technology and now in the hospitality arena. Also, we have Yvette's experience coming to us as having been through the Goldman Sachs 10K Small Business Program, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And as a result of coming through that, she's now been an alum for a couple of years, but she also has become a mentor and a coach in Goldman Sachs 1 Million Women in Business program. So she's seen both sides of the coin, if you will, receiving the advice and the consultation and the collaboration as a cohort in the Goldman Sachs program, as well as also being a alum and being a mentor in the 1 Million Women in Business program. Our second individual who will be with us today is Lee Jones. And as we get started, Lee is doing some double duty today. So when I see him back on screen, I will introduce him then, and we'll hear from Lee Jones. And it looks like he's coming back on screen now. So Lee is the founder and CEO of the Onyx Table, and he is also a serial entrepreneur. He's been in the healthcare space, technology space, and he's an engineer in background. And Lee is also a Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce Small Business Person of the Year. He was also a Vistage Chair. For those of you who may or may not be familiar with Vistage, it is the country's largest peer advisory group, and Vistage chairs tend to be individuals who are successful entrepreneurs or executives who are lending their knowledge, experience, and expertise to help others to grow their businesses. And Lee did that for a while and decided he wanted to do something that was a little bit more focused on the culture and felt like he needed a different environment in which to do that. And hopefully, ICABA has been some help to him in that space, as well as his launching of Onyx Table, which is targeted toward corporate executives and helping them to navigate leadership management issues in that space. So we're really excited to have both of them with us. And Lee, I'm going to actually jump at you first because I know I already told everyone you're kind of doing double duty. So I wanted to put this question out there before you may have to disappear for a second. He'll be in and out with us here this morning. And the question is, I'm going to ask you to finish this sentence, Lee. And that sentence I want to ask you to finish is the moment I realized I couldn't build my business alone was when blank, blank, blank. So I'm going to say it again. The moment I realized I couldn't build my business alone was when blank, blank, blank. Yeah, unmute there, Lee.
Sorry about that. And thanks for the introduction. The moment I realized I couldn't build my business alone was the true answer was at its inception, because I know I needed the Lord on my side. But beyond that, when I realized I needed other people was when I was able to attract more business than I could personally fulfill. And so I had been sort of bringing on 1099 people to help me here and there. And then there came a point where I realized I needed to have a real organization and convert my 1099s into employees. That was probably about 5 years into my business. And I just I couldn't, it wasn't that I wasn't able to sort of handle everything, but I realized that as the organization grew, it became more important um, to have a culture embedded in the organization And once I started to, to build that culture and get employees and that sort of thing, then I realized, you know, I've never done this before. And so that's where I needed not just the people around me to help me do the work, but people around me who had done what I was trying to do.
Great, great. Well, I think most of us as entrepreneurs, we've had that epiphany moment where we realized that we needed someone else to help us move along. And so, Yvette, I'm going to come to you in a second, but before I let you go, Lee, I'm going to come back to you with that same question. But before I let you go, Lee, I want to ask you another one. We all know that accountability is important, and but how does it actually show up in a peer advisory group? Can you share, Lee, a moment where either you were in a group where you were holding somebody accountable, or when you were being held accountable, and what was the benefit of that, and how did that impact your business success? Okay, looks like we may have lost him here for a minute. I'm going to go to you, Yvette, and so the question I'm going to pose to you is, you've been through the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program and the 1 million in business, and these are really highly structured peer learning environments. Can you share how those experiences impacted you as it relates to how you approach collaboration and peer input today? And I know you're mentoring, several young women who are in business and in a structured environment through 1 million women, but also just in general. It may be some of your family members and friends. So I know you talk to people all the time and provide them that kind of advice. How did the experience that you had in the peer learning environment impact what you've been able to do as a peer yourself, as well as being someone who mentors?
The experience is really responsible for what helped me scale. When you're by yourself and you think that you know what you're doing and you think that you're making the sound decisions and you feel like I got a grip on this, is when you'll find out you don't. You have to have people around you in business, and they need to be at all different levels. And that was one of the great things about Goldman Sachs, my cohort. We had members whose company was making 40 million, and we had members whose cohort was making 200,000. So you had this wide financial range, but you also had all these people from different backgrounds and cultures and beliefs. And when you come together and you put all of that in a big bowl, so to speak, and stir it around, you come out with really great ideas. For example, I was facing a client who was a very difficult client, but it was my highest paying client. And it took another peer to say to me, "Hey, Yvette, all money isn't good money. You're not happy with this client. You're frustrated every day. You wake up with a headache. You really don't want to talk to this client. You're going to have to let this client go," which is very difficult for someone who's starting a business, because you tend to want to take any client to survive. But had I not had that peer advisory group to kind of guide me through that process, I'm not sure exactly where my company would be right now, because of their advice and their guidance, and mostly their support. Because honestly, only entrepreneurs understand entrepreneurs. At the end of the day, when you come home, your spouse doesn't want to hear about your business decisions. And we get something called decision fatigue, and we don't want to make decisions anymore. So it takes someone in that space to help you navigate it and support you when those tough times come. So my experience has been a positive one. With the women in 1 million Black women, Black in business, who I mentor, I get mentees that are doing 8 times as much as I'm doing in business, but they still have challenges that only an experienced business person can guide them through. And I learn from them and they learn from me. And again, it's that support. It's having the choice to be able to go to a circle of people who are able to guide you and guide you with wisdom and intelligence. I tell people all the time, you can be intelligent and not wise. So wisdom will take you a lot further than intelligence. Can't hear you, Hutch.
Thank you. You touched on a couple of things there, Yvette, as you made those comments. You talked about the family, you talked about having someone to really just be there and give you some additional perspective. And as a entrepreneur, we have to um, really make sure that we take care of ourselves. And that means whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because we are an integrated human, if you will, experience within our own selves. And so you are not going to be successful in your business if your energy is not up, if your clarity is not there from a mental standpoint, acuity, and emotionally, just even in your relationships. There's a guy, Dr. Robert Wallace, who is a nuclear engineer in Baltimore and a highly successful business consultant and coach. And he's written about 6 books on entrepreneurship. And I read one of his books, and Jesus, it's been over 30 years ago when I read the first one. And one of the things that he talked about was preparing yourself to go into business, that you had to also prepare your family life. Because if you're an entrepreneur and your family doesn't understand the rigors of being an entrepreneur, they're going to pull on you and have expectations of you. They're going to be unrealistic. Okay. And that's going to cause tension. That's going to cause stress. And I have my own story that I'll share with you guys about that. I literally, in 1985, married my late wife in October. And on October 19th and November 22nd, 1985, I started my first business. And so we had just gotten married, and probably maybe it was around 2 or 3 months into the marriage. She asked me one day, she says, and I at that time I was in the home entertainment retail business, movies and music store. And so we were open 7 days a week and, basically about 12 hours a day. And when you're starting out a business, you're kind of working open to close and a lot of times every day. So she asked me one day, she said, so how long is this going to last, you working every day and open to close? And because I had grown up with a father who was an entrepreneur and had been exposed to other entrepreneurs in my family, I had somewhat, if you will, an advantage of already knowing what to expect. And without batting an eye, or missing a beat, I said, probably a year or two. I thought she was going to pass out, because she's thinking I was going to say maybe another month or two, but as an entrepreneur, it's critically important, to have that kind of support. And as you were saying, Yvette, having somebody with some wisdom who can say to you, you know, how you deal with this customer. And sometimes you may find that someone will tell you, if that customer is giving you that much grief, you may need to fire them, and it's totally counter to what most entrepreneurs would think. Like, I'm not firing, my clients. I'm trying to get more of them. So thank you, Yvette. That was really great. I want to go back, to that question that I asked Lee, and also asked that of you, Yvette. And the question was, the moment I realized I couldn't build my business alone was when blank blank.
When I got a contract with a particular client and it was larger than life, and I realized I could not split in two. I couldn't be at 2 places or 3 places at one, and I needed help and I needed it fast. And I had to find help and train help and make them a part of my vision. Sometimes you realize, as you said, it's not about you, and you will realize in your business you can't go any further without the help of someone. So to think you can start a business and do it all by yourself, it will be a wake-up call when you find out that day that you cannot. And unfortunately for me, I didn't have a lot of time when I found that out. I had 7 days to get help, and a lot of it. So I hope that none of you put yourself in that position. And wherever you are in your business right now, you seek out peers that can start helping you and advising you along the way so you don't get in that position where you're making a mad dash to find the much needed help. Can't hear you, Hutch.
Thank you. I'm going to take this moment and give a couple of you a couple of minutes to shine. But I'm going to first bring. I see Lee is back, and as I mentioned to you, he's got double duty today, so I really appreciate him going through this. So Lee, let me go back to a question I was wanting to ask you, and that question was, we all know, if you will, that accountability is important, but talk to me how, in your experience in peer groups, has actually with accountability showing up in that peer group, and have you had any specific moment where being held accountable by someone in your peer group, or you holding somebody accountable in the peer group that you can discuss that was either impacted your trajectory where you were being held accountable, or where you saw someone else's business being, if you will, affected in terms of changing their trajectory because they had people who were holding them accountable to those goals and it kept them on track?
Sure. Are you able to hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Um, there are, innumerable examples of what you're talking about, this accountability. One thing that I will say that is particularly poignant inside of a peer advisory group is the longitudinal nature of your relationship. And what I mean by that is because you know that these people are with you month after month, you're going to be formally meeting. In between those meetings, you have relationships and they aren't changing. It isn't, I'm going to hold an event and whoever shows up, shows up. It's, you've made a commitment to the group. That allows you to be able to have an accountability network for day-to-day things. So it's one thing to say, I need someone to help me with a particular decision, and I'm going to, call on my network or ask this guy that I know is an expert in this thing and that thing, and those bigger things that would naturally lead you to go and seek external counsel, come up. But what's more powerful, I think, is the ability to have someone who's going to you can make a commitment to this month on something that you're going to do this week and that they're going to ask you about it next week. And so whether that is, hey, I have a toxic employee, which we saw many people who had that, and you're sort of battling between, do I extend grace and try to groom them and move them along, or do I remove them so that they don't poison the whole organization? And you make a commitment in a meeting, then someone's going to ask you about that commitment, in between the meeting and the next meeting, or at the next meeting at the latest, and you say what you did. And just knowing that there's someone else who cares, and someone else who is not going to let you just sort of persist in any kind of dysfunction is the bigger win. Certainly we saw people who changed things, ranging from deciding to sell the business or confronting a business partner about some sort of issue, to instituting a new formal department in their companies, like building a sales team or something like that, which is one thing that Visage, when I was in Visage, that helped me work through, to even committing to, there was a guy in my group who, his son was emotionally and mentally challenged, and he was very prone to having different kind of outbursts. So much so that he had to live in a special facility. Well, he brought him, he would bring him home sometimes, and when he did that, he'd take him to work, and he was sort of struggling between how do I want to show, I want to make sure I'm showing up for my son, doing what he needs, but I also want to show up for the business. And I want the people in the business to know that I'm committed to both my family and them as my business. But he would bring his son to work, and his son was sort of disruptive, and he had to do extraordinary things to control him, et cetera. And so we were able to talk through all the things that led him to make the decisions he was making about bringing his son to work and why he didn't take off and all these other things. But when he decided on a course of action, then we were there to not just ask him, did he do it, but to encourage him along the way, to tell him to be strong, to empathize with, his situation, and to make sure he wasn't alone in the process. And so I think that some of those kinds of emergent everyday things are probably more important than just, hey, I had this big problem. I'm going to make a plan, and I want you guys to keep me honest.
Gotcha. Well, the thing that I will share with the audience today is that I guess it was about this time last year. I asked you, and I also asked Ricardo Molina to be a accountability group for me. One of the things that, as a entrepreneur, we're somewhat isolated. Most of the people that are in your organization, unless you have business partners, tend to work for you. And so only certain things you can say to them and share with them, because there has to be, if you will, kind of a professional distance, and there's also proprietary information that you don't share and so on. And so many times you don't have the ability to have someone who can, from your vantage point as an entrepreneur, look at what you're doing and what's going on and helping you to stay focused on it. And when you're by yourself, if you miss a deadline or you miss a target, goal, or objective, it's kind of easy for you to rationalize, oh yeah, I got real busy last week. I'm going to kick that can down the road the next week. Next week it happens, something else happens, they get kicked down the road another. And I know everybody here that, as they say, under the sound of my voice, has kicked the proverbial can down the road. Okay. And we all know that when someone is standing there, okay, asking you, okay, you were supposed to, put this can, and take care of it this week, versus, being able to kick it down the road and nobody knows. Accountability is one of the things that raises the trajectory of your performance, because no one wants to look bad in the eyes of the people who are, basically reviewing, holding them accountable, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that I've read as it relates to growth of CEOs, that they say the number one thing for growing a successful CEO is accountability. Having somebody who is saying that, what, you said you were going to do X, Y, Z, and we're going to kind of hold you accountable to that. And so I'll also leave you with another quick perspective about accountability. One of the things I learned in working in radio was that, working for a public radio station, that we had the responsibilities of forecasting our sales as sales directors. And the corporate office counted on our projections to be accurate. And so if the company owned 100 radio stations and they had a quarterly call with Wall Street to project the company's revenues, they had to make sure that each 100 sales directors like myself were giving them good information. Because if we were giving them bad information, you know what they say, garbage in, garbage out. That bad information was going to be passed on, but it wasn't just going to be passed on from one station. It was going to be passed on dramatically from a number of different, if you will, stations. And that cumulative effect could really be interesting and impactful. So what I also learned, though, is that not only was it important for the radio company to achieve the numbers, the revenue projections they had given to Wall Street. So if they said we were going to do, say, $100 million in this quarter, obviously you want to make that number that you said you were going to make. You want to make that $100 million. But what I found quite interesting, the way Wall Street views and values companies, that if he came up short, we can all imagine that, yes, Wall Street did not react positively. But also, if you came up substantially over what you projected, Wall Street also did not react positively because they felt like if you said 100 million and you came in with 125 million, you don't know your business. And for those top executives, knowing their business and being able to accurately project what they were going to deliver in terms of top line revenue to the and bottom line revenue to the Wall Street analysts, it was very, very important that they knew exactly what was going on. So as you're managing your business, if you're doing better than you thought, then you have to go back and say, okay, what did I not, or what did I miss in terms of looking at some of my projections? And if you don't have someone helping you that holding you accountable to that, someone that I know if I went to Lee and said, Lee, we were supposed to do, you know, 50,000 this month and we ended up doing 75. I know the first question in Lee's map, well, why did you do 75? How did you go from 50 to 75? Not that it's a bad thing, but not knowing that you were going to do the 75 is really the thing. So, you yourself, you probably would say without someone asking you and holding you accountable, oh, that's great. But whatever you're doing well, we have to learn how to be able to replicate. And obviously, things that we're not doing well, we have to learn how to either eliminate or minimize. Got another question, but I want to also ask a question to some of the folks here in the audience here. And this is a question that I think applies to all of us. As a matter of fact, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. So I'm going to change my screen here so I can see everybody. And so either use your reactions or use your physical, if you will, ability to raise your hand. Anybody here have a blind spot as it relates to how you see things, how you manage? You know what I'm saying? A blind spot. Anybody got blind spots? Okay. All right. Yinka, you didn't raise your hand. You got blind spot. Okay. Don't be sitting back there trying to just because you over in London think you're gonna get away. All right. So we know everybody has blind spots. So here's the question. So Lee, and then we'll go to Yvette. Every entrepreneur, as we've just determined, has blind spots, areas where we don't know what we don't know. And just as a personal aside, I just spent the weekend with my daughters and in LA and went to my daughter's job and was talking to the owners of the company and they were telling me she was doing great and so on and so forth. And said you did a good job raising it. At some point, for whatever reason, my youngest daughter, namely who I'm talking about, said, yeah, Dad taught us a lot. He said one of the things he always used to tell us was you don't know what you don't know, and that's where blind spots come. You think you're doing great, but you don't know something, and that's where you can get that blind spot. So the question is, um, what is the area, and how has part of being an advisory group? Well, I'm sorry. The first question is, I mentioned about you having a blind spot. What area have you found in your business that you at one time had a blind spot for and you discovered it and it was able to help you to do a better job of managing your business? Anybody had a blind spot, you discovered what it was, and then you were able to make the adjustment and it helped you to do a better job of managing your business?
Are you asking me that, Hutch, or are you asking the group?
No, that's open to the group. Yes, it's open to the group. All right. So everybody said they had a blind spot, but you don't want to tell anybody what it was.
I'll say something.
All right. Go ahead, Wendy.
I can't pinpoint any specific blind spot, but I did recognize that whatever hustle that I did to get me to, I would say year 2, I realized would not take me to year 3 or year 4. And so I started surrounding myself like in groups like this and other groups to hear from more established business owners to hear what they're doing and so on. And so I could apply it through my lens on ways to, grow my business.
Well, let me ask you a question before I let you go based on what you just said.
Uh-huh.
Many entrepreneurs will say, I don't have time to go to a peer advisory group. I don't have time to go to this business development conference or take any courses that will help me to get better in terms of my knowledge and expertise. What do you say to that, Wendy?
I hear that. Listen, I even hear that when I used to be in corporate and they had assigned training for staff, people was like, I don't have time to learn. So it's I get it. People don't have time, but you make time. If you think it's important for the growth of your business, you're looking forward, not just the I don't have time right now, but you're looking at, well, you could gain a lot of practical knowledge from others that could take you to that next level. I definitely will make the time for that.
And has that been your experience when you've taken the time to go to, a course or training, a conference or something? Many times we do those and we walk away like, man, I sure am glad I went because I met this or I learned this or that. Has that been your experience, Wendy?
Yes, for sure. And for one example, it would be um doing like a proposal call per se. Just someone had talked me through this is how it's generally done, like was giving me recommendations. And I'm like, prior to that, I didn't even know that that existed, as in there is a way to go through a proposal call. So yeah, there is always benefit.
Gotcha. Colette, did you have your hand up? I thought I saw it a second ago. Okay. Well, it's up now. All right, Colette.
So I'm listening to the conversation, and when somebody says, I don't have time, in my mind, that means they don't see the value. So if someone does not see the value, they will not have time. If they see the value, they will make time because people make time for what they think is important. We go and get our nails done, we go get our hair cut, we do all of these things. You don't have time for that either, but you see the value of it, and so you do it. So if we can help people understand what the value is to them, because everybody has a different pain spot, what is important to them. And so I equate that to they just don't see the value. If they saw the value, they would make the time.
Gotcha.
2 cents.
Well, today's session is really about just what you're talking about. It is helping people to understand the value of a peer group and making that time because sometimes we don't see the value. Not always because, the value is not there, but sometimes we just don't understand what the value is. If you've never been in a peer advisory group, you may not know what the value of a peer advisory group is until after you do it. Well, if you don't do it, you'll never know what it is. And so that's one of the challenges that we definitely run into. Um, Let me also go to Yvette. And Yvette, we were talking about blind spots and being part of an advisory group. Have you had any opportunities to help anyone in your coaching experience who you determined from talking with them that they had a blind spot about their business, something that they didn't, they just didn't see it, that was affecting them in some kind of way, and how were you able to help them through it?
Absolutely. With one of my mentees, who, by the way, was very, very successful. Um, but she didn't think she was so successful. And I said to her, you've got 3 locations. You're the state head of what it is that you do from the state of Ohio. They appointed her over that cosmetology board. I said, what is the problem? And she sat there and said, I don't know. So we went through her business plan. We went through her growth plan. We went through all the strategic outlets, so to speak, to find out what it was that was troubling her. What is this blind spot that you keep saying is there because I don't see it? And the blind spot was something that was within herself. Sometimes we think things in our business has to do with strategy, but a lot of times it can be mental. We can have mental blind spots within ourselves. And that is why you have to have peers or advisors to bring those things out. And I will tell you this, everybody that's in your peer group or that you use as an advisor, you may not like them. Okay, you don't have to like them for them to help you. Stop surrounding yourself with people who are like you or who you deem as friends. If you can be friends, that's a bonus, but that is not a necessity for you to take advice that will help your business grow. That's a misnomer. So please don't do that. Do not look for like spirits. Look for people who are so different from you who can take you to the next level. Okay? That's Yvette's tidbit of the day. Can't hear you, Hutch.
So I think it's so important to make sure that you don't just surround yourselves. There's a reason why they talk about coaches and they don't talk about cheerleaders as it relates to getting business advisors. A coach is someone who is going to cheer you on, but they're also going to be the one who's going to push you beyond what you think you're capable of doing and also point out to you those things that you may not be doing well or you need to do better or a skill you need to acquire. And so we need that coaching. And so, when Yvette was saying about not having yourself around people where all of you think alike, I know in the conversation I was having with somebody last week, I said, well, I learned a long time ago, if I'm in a group of people and we all think alike, then there's too many people in the group because I need somebody who's going to come with a different perspective and different background. And I don't need to be around people who are just going to say the same thing that I already know. Lee, back to you, sir.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. Yeah, so there are two blind spots. And forgive me for the camera. I'm sort of moving around, but two blind spots that my former peer group directly helped me with. I credit them. They were related. Um, One is, and both of them have to do with sales and selling. So everyone in my business was a B2B business, and it was in healthcare. It was kind of really niche space, and people were selling all kinds of other things in my group, and they were all sort of touting going to sales training, and I kind of poo-pooed that because I was I was still in the phase where most of my business was coming through referrals and client endorsements and that sort of thing. But when I started to get to a point where I had to go beyond that and attract people generally, I realized that selling was not intuitive, which I kind of thought it was. It was like, I'm smart, I know what I'm talking about, I can present the case, et cetera, but I discounted the value of formal sales training. But everyone in my group not only was doing it, but it kept pushing me and telling me I needed to do it. And they stopped, if I would talk about sales, they was, put their hands over their ears and say they're not going to listen to me until I know what I'm talking about. So I took some sales training, and it was transformative in terms of my understanding of the process of having a sales funnel and how you move people through for a complex sale and all that other kind of stuff. So that was one. The second related thing was because I was also B2B, I also didn't, my blind spot was I didn't think that I needed to do any kind of online digital advertising or marketing and that sort of thing, because I always associated that with a B2C kind of concept. And so the blind spot that this guy in my group, Sam, helped me get through was people are people, whatever their job is, whatever their role is. And if the person that you need to talk to is going to be looking at this forum, then you should be saying what you need to say, even if they're looking at it in a social context. If they hear something that's applicable to them in their business context, then it's worthwhile. And so once I got that idea that I'm really trying to reach particular people and I wasn't trying to reach a business, which is sort of an entity, that was in employing these people, it unlocked, a new avenue of marketing that was beneficial for the business.
Fantastic. Glad to hear it. Does anyone have any questions? I want to stop and make sure if anyone had any questions. We're talking about a peer advisory group, the value of it, and we want to, kind of transition right now and talk a little bit about how to make that peer advisory group work for you. And one of the things that I tend to really focus on with folks as it relates to that is many times when we go into something, if you go to a class, you're looking to gain and take something away that you can learn. If you go into most things where you're trying to acquire some knowledge or skill, or even in networking, people go to a networking event and they're looking to meet people that are going to be able to help them with their business in some shape, form, or fashion, revenue, opportunities, access, whatever that may be. But as we are also taught about building relationships that come as you're in that networking mode, it's not necessarily so much about what you get, it's what you give, because what you give is going to turn out to determine really about what you get back. Same thing works with a peer advisory group. You've got to go in looking that you want to get out of it, obviously something that's going to be beneficial. But in order for it to really work, you have to participate. You have to be actively engaged, and you have to go in with a mindset that you're going to give something to the group, because everybody who's giving in the group is what everybody gets back. And so if everybody's giving, everybody's going to get back, and that's how it works. I want to ask Lee if he could talk a little bit about that dynamic, people in peer advisory groups and their giving and getting, if you will, how those are interrelated, and how to make sure that your participation and your engagement is strong so that you get back what you would hope to get out of being involved in a peer advisory group. And then Yvette, on that, take that same question to you as well.
Yeah, I think that that's really a fundamental requirement for participating, because if you're really there to just suck all you can out of other people and not reciprocate, then you become a drain on the group, and the group is just like you were talking about firing customers earlier, would be within their right to sort of fire you, because the idea is not just, hey, let me come and um, have sort of a unidirectional relationship with these people. The Beyond any costs or fees it takes to participate in those groups, the understood fee is that you're going to bring your mind to the table so that you can help other people. The good news is that the contribution is, a baseline for the contribution. It doesn't have to be, you have to prepare something for every meeting and offer it up, and this is where I'm an expert. It's really just being open and transparent with what's going on with you. And people will glean a lot about their own business by just hearing what you're doing. So, so the attitude that you're there to give as well as to receive is one part of it. But the other, the encouragement there is, it's not hard. You just need to be transparent and bring your business, yourself, your approaches, et cetera, to the table, and that will prompt others to probe you where they need to probe you.
You bet.
I'm going to take that from a different approach, Hutch. I'm going to use my mentees with 1 Million Black Women, Black in Business. I don't get paid from Goldman Sachs to mentor them. I want to make that clear. That is a servant heart to help others. But when my group, after each cohort, they have a graduation in New York City, I fly to New York at my own expense to meet with my mentees. And I take them to dinner, I bring them a gift, and I spend time with them. Because again, for me, it's a labor of love. In return, and I expect nothing from them. When they leave and they graduate and they go on their ways, I'll get phone calls. Miss Yvette, are you okay? Miss Yvette, do you need anything? I have one who, Hutch, I introduced you, Angela, which I spoke to yesterday, is doing extremely well in the business finance department. She's like, how are you? Miss Yvette, do you need capital? Because I got you. When you pour into people, they will in turn pour into you. And I build lasting relationships with my mentees. They just don't pass through me like some of the other mentors. I continue to send a monthly email and check on each one, or I'll just call an impromptu meeting. And 98% of them show up because they know that I have a genuine interest in them. And I don't take it lightly. These women are trusting me to give advice and speak into their lives, their businesses, their livelihoods. I don't take that lightly. It's an honor that they trust me to do that. So, yeah, when you have the right people around you, and I can speak for my group briefly because I know we're running out of time. My peer advisory group through Goldman Sachs, I don't take them lightly either, because these are people, like I said, some of them have $45 million businesses a year, but they take their time when I call to say, hey, Yvette, are you okay? I got a text last night at midnight from a friend who runs Orca Intelligence. She said, hey, girl, hadn't heard from you, just checking on you. You good? Do you need anything? When you have those kind of people in your corner, how can you not be successful? So it's the same principle that kind of you get out what you put in.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think as we're talking about peer groups, one of the things you have to also go in to a peer group with is a willingness to be transparent. Now, the people who are running the peer group, they have to make sure that they've created a trusted environment. And so, we do those things on the front end in terms of helping people understand. It's almost like your peer group is, called Las Vegas. So we know the old phrase, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So what happens in our peer group stays in the peer group, and so one of the things that is critically important is being transparent, because if you go to the doctor and your leg is bothering you, but you don't want to tell them that your leg is bothering you for some reason, you want to tell them that your arm is hurting and your arm is fine, you're not going to get the leg fixed. Same thing if you go into a peer group and you say, hey, my business is great, we're growing, and right now you're struggling with your employees, you need some capital, but you don't say anything about that because you want everybody to think that you're fine. How many times has we've had to experience of being in a group of either two people or more, where folks were talking about what they were going through, what they were dealing with, and everything was everybody was great, everything was rosy, and then somebody says they have a problem, they're struggling, and then after they tell their story, the next thing you know, somebody else is struggling and has a story. And after that, someone else is struggling and has a story. And then we get real, okay? And then once we get real, now we can deal with it, because now the doctor knows the problem is not in your arm, it's in your leg. So let's look at the leg and figure it out. And then the doctor said, well, I can actually fix that. And you're like, really? Well, the same thing happens in a peer group. You may think that the problems that you're having, are insurmountable. You may think that the challenges that you're dealing with are unique just to you. But one of the things you find out in that peer group is like, they're having the same problem. Okay. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget early in my career. I just gotten out of college and just started my first company. And the new mayor of my hometown, Louisville, Kentucky, had invited me to be a part of this group of entrepreneurs that he was meeting with on a quarterly basis to figure out what could he do as mayor to make the business climate better for their success. And so I'm sitting in this room and I'm like 22 years old. And these guys, I'm the youngest guy in the room. And I think probably, if I can remember correctly, probably the only black guy in the room. And all these very successful entrepreneurs were in this room. I mean, guys who were running multi-million-dollar businesses. And so the first thing that Jerry, that was the name of the mayor's name, was Jerry Abramson. The first thing Jerry did was say, okay, what are your three top problems that you're having? So let's start out with trying to address those. And everybody's top problem was access to capital. And I was sitting there thinking, like, you gotta be kidding me. All these white boys and white girls and doing great businesses, and they were talking about having problems with access to capital. Well, up to that point, generally when I talk to black business people, they would always say they had problems with access to capital, but it always seemed to get framed in a racial, if you will, context. And I realized in that moment that access to capital is a problem for everybody, black, red, green, blue, or purple. And there were things that you had to deal with. But I never would have realized that at such an early age had not been in that group and heard that from these individuals. And what they ended up doing was bringing in three bankers for our next meeting. and to talk about building relationships and understanding how they could do a better job of serving the local business community with capital. And a lot of them talk about having gone outside the market to find their capital. But so the point I'm saying to you guys is that in a peer advisory group, one of the most important things is to be transparent. Because if people don't know what you're dealing with or what you may be challenged with, and I will tell you something else that I'm sure that you've all had some experience with in some kind of way, whether it was personal, professional, or otherwise, where you may have been in a group and you shared something that you were having a challenge with. When the meeting was over, when the session was over, or the family gathering, or whatever it was, you may have had an experience where somebody came up to you afterwards and said, "Hey, I heard you say that you were having a issue with this or a problem with that. I know somewhere where you can get that done, or I can do this for you." Anybody had that kind of experience? I'm just going to throw that out. Is this just me, or has anyone had that kind of experience when you were transparent, and because you were transparent, somebody heard what you need and they actually came and were able to take care of it for you? Lee, share, please. I see you nodding there.
Yeah, I would say that that was the most prevalent kind of thing uh, that happened. So the way that our format was, every month there would be one person who did a deep dive on their business, and we took turns and rotated. And when you would see how someone kept their books, or somehow they organized their organizational structure, or the way that they instituted certain cultural norms, one, it was inspiring to you. But when they would bring up things that, you're like, this guy's really knocking out the park, and then they bring up something that you were doing, well, it was just like you were excited to bring forward, hey, look, I can help you with that. Right. And so not only was it um, you know, something that happened, but people were looking for opportunities to do something like that because they wanted to contribute to your success. I know with me, I remember how, I was having an issue with my board, and a lot of people didn't have boards. And so, I always felt like, well, these people don't really know what's going on. And I was reluctant to bring things there. But when I started talking about some of the issues, people had similar situations, even if it wasn't my exact situation, because it was really about some interpersonal things. It gave me counsel about, hey, you should go and you should make sure that you do this with the board members prior to the meeting. You should do this. You should check in here. You should say that kind of stuff. So even when I thought that this group, from what I knew of them, didn't share my world, I found that they still were able to offer things that I wasn't expecting just because I mentioned it.
Yvette, you want to add to that?
I was just going to encourage the transparency. I'm going to talk real quick. I don't know how many of you are familiar with WPO, the Women's President's Organization. One of their requirements is that you must make a minimum of $2 million a year with your business, and you have to present your tax returns to become a member. At any rate, I attended a meeting in Montreal, and there was a young lady who stood up and said, "Hey, I'm struggling. My business is struggling." And she stood there and said that in front of thousands of women. But I'm going to tell you, so many women got up with their checkbook to help that woman because she had the boldness and was able to be transparent to go up there and say, "Look, I'm dying on the hill. Help me." So don't suffer in silence when you have all these business people around you. Let them know that, hey, I need help with this. And so there's, something else I'm kind of working on with Hutch. We're not ready to launch that at the end. Once you complete the Founders Advisory Circle, you got to do that first. Talking about coming in and doing sort of like a business makeover for you, help you with that final piece. So just keep that in mind.
Lee, back to I thought did you have a
Yeah,
hand up
no,
there?
no.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just wanted to say something, um, before we're done. It's not, the peer advisory group is not just a therapy session or everybody brings all their problems and is doom and gloom. I wanted to also just show that it's a testimony time, right? And people share their successes, and you can be inspired by what they've done. You're happy about people that you've helped along the way. And it's encouraging when they're trying to do the same thing you're trying to do and you see them succeed. And so there's this whole testimony strengthening aspect to it that we hadn't really talked a lot about. So it's not just a moaning session, if you will, where everybody comes in with some problems and how do we survive? How do we fix this, et cetera? It's also, hey, look, I knocked it out the park this last quarter. This is what I did. This is what's going on. And people to be genuinely happy for you and with you.
A great comment, Lee, and I want to add something to that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to ask for Andrew. I see you're up there. I think you may be able to turn your camera on, and I want to bring him up for a minute. We're going to close out here. But what I wanted to say is that, the peer advisory group, a big part of it is the conversation amongst the peers, being able to talk with each other. But one of the things that is going to be a hallmark of what we've done is what's called the Masterpreneur Growth Assessment. So when you come in the door, or actually before you come in the door for the first session, you will have spent time going through a assessment of what your needs are to grow as an entrepreneur. And you'll get a debriefing with Andrew Frazier, the Masterpreneur from Small Business Pro University. Secondly, every session is going to be built with people there who can help you with any type of technical management assistance. On a quarterly basis, we will have different business experts come in and talk with the group and share different things. We also will be able to help you with, so hearing what your issues are is not about a pity party. It's about a transparency and a needs analysis and assessment as to what can the founder circle do to connect you to the resources, information, and opportunities and relationships to solve that problem. So we're not just there, to moan, and we're also not there just to brag about what we've done and what's great. We're there to share, to find opportunities to lean into each other and help. Andrew, I know you've heard all of this discussion, and I'm going to give it to you for some last words, kind of wrapping up as what you might say to folks as it relates to what you've heard and what they're getting from this particular session and how that relates to the Founders Circle.
Okay, great. Thanks, Hutch. Yvette, Lee, thanks for sharing so many valuable insights. Definitely every business is different and every business owner is different, but there's still a certain path and evolution every business owner has to take and make to be able to move forward. And the one thing I really like about what we're doing here is, definitely it's a peer advisory network, but on the next level, we're also utilizing a proven framework to help you grow so you can be more prepared for things that are coming up. You could be more proactive in taking advantage of opportunities. It can help you be more creative and flexible. So, it's both forward-looking, present-looking, and backward-looking. So you have a 360-degree way of looking at your business and working together with others. So, definitely taking advantage of the experience. Everybody has something to contribute. But doing it in a little bit more of a structured way, is a way to, help make sure you get the most value out of the opportunity. And that's really what it's about. Like Yvette, we have a commitment to supporting the success of Black business owners and entrepreneurs. And that's important in whatever groups that you're involved in, is a commitment to your success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here for the April 22nd edition of ICABA Biz Connect, and we'll see you again next Wednesday. Really excited about things that you're doing in your businesses and how you're growing and how we can assist you in that particular effort. And so if everybody has anything they want to say, or you want to announce something before we get off, share something with folks, now is the opportunity to do that. And I'm going to open up the floor before we sign off here. Anybody have a question or announcement that you want to make? Nope. 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 All right, Yinka, you got your hand up. Unmute there, sweetheart.
About
Get unmute. There you go.
collaborators who want to work with some of the people in the business. I would like to discuss that with anyone who likes to collaborate.
Okay, repeat that because I'm not sure everybody heard the whole thing, everything you said.
Sorry?
I said, can you repeat that? I'm not sure everybody heard everything you said.
Okay. You know, in business, sometimes you find collaborators when you don't really know the next step, and then you want to know who is interested in what you're doing. So if there's anyone who is interested in production, who wants to collaborate in movies and stuff, so I'd like to know such people, such business people.
Fantastic. All
Yeah.
right.
Yes, I have my reasons for saying that. So maybe when we get together and speak about it, then I'll say exactly, I'll say more about that.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. Go forth, guys. Conquer. Okay, let's do it. Have a great day. See you next week.
Level up your success with the ICABA World Network, where accomplished Black professionals and entrepreneurs have created a thriving global ecosystem built from valuable connections and impactful collaborations. Be a part of a trusted network that uplifts, inspires, and enhances your success. Join like-minded and leading Black professionals to foster meaningful relationships, unlock opportunities, and access the resources you need to thrive in your career, business, and life. Go to ICABAWorldNetwork.com and join today.